I met Paul and said, do you want to join my band, And then George joined. And then Ringo joined. We were just a band who made it very, very big, that's all.
Hello, my name is Scott, and welcome to Digger Podcast. In this show, I take an in-depth look behind each and every song of the greatest band that is, was, and ever will be, the Beatles. In this season, Season 3, I will explore the Beatles' third album released in the US, entitled The Beatles Second Album. Although this is the Beatles' third album, this is the second album released on the Capitol Records label, hence the name. Capitol Records issued the Beatles' second album on the 10th of April 1964, and it topped the US charts on the 2nd of May 1964 on its second week of release, replacing Meet the Beatles. This is the first time an artist replaced itself at the number one spot in America. Let's carry on our musical journey with the next track from the Beatles' second album,
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
You Can't Do That. The influence of the Beatles on modern music is still felt today. Whether current hitmakers admit it or not, or realize it or not, the patterns and structures used in popular music most times can be tracked back to the pathway paved in the 60s by the Fab Four. This riff, which encapsulates guitar rock throughout the generations, was first popularized by the Beatles in the song You Can't Do That. The Beatles use this feature continuously throughout their career, evidenced in I Feel Fine, Ticket to Ride, Day Tripper, If I Needed Someone, Paperback Writer, and I Want to Tell You, among others. The riff usually appears at the beginning of the song, played by only one guitar, after which the rest of the band kicks in and plays the remainder. The riff then becomes the most prominent, identifiable feature of the song, as it is repeated throughout or in strategic places of the song. Other 60s artists were quick to pick up on this trend, such as the Rolling Stones, Satisfaction, and The Last Time, the Yardbirds, Heart Full of Soul, Paul Revere and the Raiders, Kicks, and the Monkees, Pleasant Valley Sunday. Evidence of this trade even made it to the 90s, with such hits as Blisters in the Sun, There She Goes, and even Smells Like Teen Spirit. The Beatles may not have been the first to utilize this gimmick. Witness the piano riff on Money That's What I Want, but they were the first to make it fashionable and trend-setting, as anyone, it seemed, was bent on emulating the formula the Beatles were using. The trend-setting formula of the two-measure guitar riff was heard first on the John Lennon rocker You Can't Do That. Songwriting history. Paul and I enjoyed writing music for the film, but there were times when we honestly thought we'd never get time to write all the material. Lennon said in 1964 about writing the songs for their movie A Hard Day's Night. You Can't Do That was one of those songs. George Harrison stated in an interview at the time that You Can't Do That was written in Miami Beach. This would mean that the writing occurred between February 13th and 21st during their first visit to America. You Can't Do That was intended for the film, but it was cut out of the movie at the last minute. On March 31st, 1964, the Beatles lip-synced the song during the television performance sequence of the movie before 350 screaming fans at the Scala Theatre in London. Phil Collins, of Genesis fame, was one of the 350 fans on the day who remember You Can't Do That being part of that performance. The song may have been cut from the movie, but it was broadcast on The Ed Sullivan Show on May 24th, 1964, and is featured in the 1994 video The Making of a Hard Day's Night, hosted by Phil Collins. Both John and Paul have acknowledged in interviews that You Can't Do That was entirely a Lennon composition. Since their contract with EMI was signed in 1962, they had concentrated mostly on collaboration, but with McCartney securing for himself the A-side for the next single with the self-penned Can't Buy Me Love, this presumably was the catalyst for Lennon to push ahead and concentrate heavily on solo songwriting throughout the rest of 1964. You Can't Do That was the first fruits for his determination. Concerning the song's inspiration, Lennon stated in 1980, "That's me doing Wilson Pickett. You know, a cowbell going 4 in the bar, and the chord going cha-toong." Hearing this from the horse's mouth, you would think that would settle the issue. Unfortunately, this is not the case. The problem is that Wilson Pickett had not come into his own as of January of 1964, when this song was written. By that time, Wilson had only released 4 early singles, which were 6/8 ballads, quite unlike anything he's known for, such as In Midnight Hour and Mustang Sally, which were much closer to what Lennon was talking about. Those early ballads definitely didn't have a cowbell or anything resembling a cha-toong. John obviously was thinking retrospectively and originally found inspiration elsewhere, such as the R&B classics coming out of Memphis at the time. Confirmation of where the inspiration actually came from may never be known. One thing that has been established is the honest autobiographical nature of the song's lyrics. I think a lot of these songs may have been based in real experiences, McCartney has stated, or arguments with Cynthia or whatever, but it never occurred to us until later to put that slant on it all. John's possessiveness with the women in his life, especially his first wife Cynthia, had been well documented in various autobiographies of his life. Touches of his jealous tendency could be found throughout his songwriting output within the Beatles as well as his solo career, especially 1971's Jealous Guy from his Imaginer album. Recording history. Having just returned to London on February 22nd, 1964, from their triumphant first visit to America, the Beatles had a very busy schedule ahead of them. Their first motion picture, untitled at this time, was due to begin shooting on March 2nd, and the songs for the film needed to be fully recorded before the movie could be started. The 7-film requirement meant they had to get cracking right away, so after filming a television appearance on February 23rd, they headed to EMI Studio 2 on February 25th, ready for work. There were 2 recording sessions on February 25th, George Harrison's 21st birthday, the first running from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m., which was devoted entirely to the month-old You Can't Do That. The band played the song live on mostly newly acquired instruments. John's brand new Rickenbacker 325, designed especially for him, George's new Rickenbacker 360 12-string guitar, and Ringo's second Ludwig drum kit. Paul's 1963 Hofner bass had been in use in the studio since I Wanna Hold Your Hand. John also sang lead vocals live along with the instruments. 4 complete takes were taped, along with 5 full starts, before everyone was satisfied. One of the complete takes, Take 6, can be heard on Anthology 1, which shows John as the one singing at this point. This is not a guide vocal, as authors claim, but their usual practice of getting a perfect recording live. A decision was made to include backing vocals from Paul and George. So by take 9, which ended up being the keeper, all 3 vocalists were singing live on this basic recording. On this they performed 3 overdubs, Paul playing the cowbell throughout the song, Ringo playing the bongos, and finally John double-tracking his vocals during the bridges. This then was used as the finished master version of the song. George Martin wasted no time in creating the mono mix for this song. The next day, February 26th, Martin and engineers Norman Smith and Richard Langham reserved the morning session 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. to perfect the mono mix of You Can't Do That and Can't Buy Me Love, which was dutifully shipped off to Capitol Records in the US for their next single release. George Martin held off Capitol releasing Roll Over Beethoven as the next American single with promises of something great, so he didn't waste any time getting these new masters sent to Capitol as soon as possible. It took 4 remix attempts at You Can't Do That to get it right, but it thereafter served as a mono mix heard everywhere to this day. March 10th saw George Martin and Norman Smith, for some unknown reason, performing a stereo mix of the song along with 6 other mixes that was experimental and never used. Also, interestingly, George Martin entered the studio on May 22nd, well after the British and American release of the song as a single, to record a piano overdub, which took the song to take 10. What his intentions were are unknown, but this overdub was shelved and never heard by the public. At the last minute, as usual, George Martin oversaw the true stereo mix of the song on June 22, 1964, using take 9 so as to forego the piano overdub done on May 22nd. This was done just in time for the British album release of A Hard Day's Night on July 10th, and was the only stereo mix of the song released, but not yet in America. Since You Can't Do That was featured on the US album The Beatles' Second Album, and only a mono mix existed at the time of its release, April 10th, 1964, Capitol Records created a duophonic fake stereo version of the song for the stereo master of the album. The true stereo mix, however, contains the rhythm track, drums, bass, and George's guitar, mostly on the left channel, and John's rhythm guitar and solo, mostly in the right channel. All the vocals are centered in the mix. Another recording of the song came to be on August 23, 1964, at the Beatles' live performance at the Hollywood Bowl in Los Angeles, California. Capitol Records desired to record the group live for release as a US-only album, since George Martin vetoed the idea for the British market. It was reluctantly co-produced by George Martin and American producer Voyal Gilmore, and Hugh Davis as engineer. The album didn't get released at the time because of the disapproval of the Beatles and Capitol Records due to the poor quality of the recording. Although a revamped version of the album did get released internationally in 1977 as the Beatles at the Hollywood Bowl, the song You Can't Do That was cut from the track list and is in the vaults somewhere collecting dust. The Beatles did revive the song briefly in the studio during their infamous Get Back Let It Be sessions. The second day of tape and rehearsals in Twickenham Studios on January 3rd, 1969 saw the Beatles go over the song again after nearly 4.5 years of it not being touched. Sometime in 2016, Giles Martin, George's son, acquired access to the live recording of You Can't Do That the group performed at the Hollywood Bowl on August 23rd, 1964. From this, he produced a magnificent version of the song to be used as a bonus track on the long-awaited re-release of Live at the Hollywood Bowl. Thanks for listening to Dig a Podcast. You can subscribe to our podcast on Spreaker, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any other podcasting platform. This has been a Team Wilco production. Until next time, if you know what I mean. Do I did? No? Okay.